All right, guys, welcome back. We are going to get into some really cool stuff. We have Bryan, the master distiller of Hard Truth, and we are going to talk about all the things they're doing, all the cool things. I know you've heard them, right? I know you have. Let's get into it. Bryan, I'm gonna level with you first rattle out of the box. I
Yeah.
forgot to take the stupid cellophane off the bottle, and so I was actively trying to do that as I was talking. And as you well know, I can't do two things at one time. It's like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
trying to talk and keep everything going. So it's good to see you, brother. I'm glad you're
You as
here.
well.
So tell us a little story. My main question that I ask at the very beginning is why? Why are you
Mm,
doing what you're doing? I know, but before I
yeah.
say that, you were gracious enough to send us over some samples, and well, they're more than samples, but
Yeah.
and I wanted to dip into one because I just told you off camera I'm dealing with some mold remediation at the house. It's been a long week. I know it's only Thursday, but it's been a long week,
Yeah.
and I need to open up a drink. So I was thinking we get into the sweet mash bourbon. So if you wanted to talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that first, and then go
Sure.
into the company and your why.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we started Hard Truth Distilling Company in 2015. So in late 2014, the laws changed in Indiana, allowing you to co-locate a distillery, an artisan distillery, if you had a brewery or a winery in good standing. So my business partners had and still have a successful craft beer business in the state of Indiana, Quaffon Brewing Company, and so they, being the entrepreneurs that they are, they wanted to take the chance at this new license, and that's when I met them. And so for me, I have a incredible passion for creating delicious things, and huge curiosity for science. And
Right.
so, and I had done plenty of fermentation of beer and wine and a little bit of distillation along the way, but nothing
Right.
professionally. So, anyways, I really had no business in saying, "Hey, I'm gonna head up your project," but nonetheless, now it's 2024, and here we are in 25 states with some award-winning whiskeys. So I'm
That's awesome.
feeling pretty good about it.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
so I dipped into the sweet mash bourbon.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the process behind that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of bourbons are made with a sour mash. So
Yes.
tell us the process behind that. And I see on your head it says sweet mash as well.
You
So
betcha,
you guys are,
buddy.
are proponents of that.
Man, I'll tell you what. So, couple things that will lead me to the sweet mash story. So,
Go ahead. No, it's
first of
fine.
all, for your fans out there, I know that everyone is looking at the shelves at the liquor store these days, and there's just this just unbelievable morass of new brands that have hit the shelves in the last 10 years, and a lot of great whiskey out there, and there are some other authentic grain to glass distillers, but a lot of
Mm-hmm.
it, is borrowed whiskey that someone came up with
Mm-hmm.
a cool marketing plan, and got some MGP whiskey or some old Barton whiskey or something, and did their own brand. Hard Truth is an absolute 100% authentic grain to glass distillery. I made
Love
my
that.
relationships with our farmers before we turned to shovel of dirt on our property. Doug Miller grows our corn and some of our wheat, and Dwayne Kuhlenschmidt grows as much rye as I can get him to grow for us. And so, and then we mash, ferment, distill, and age right on our 325 acres in beautiful Brown County, Indiana. So to start out, we're a grain to glass distillery. If you like what's in your
Amazing.
glass, it's because of us. If you don't like it, it's because of us. It's on, no matter what,
Absolutely.
it's our authentic expression. But really, as far as a formative moment when we were deciding what we wanted to be when we grew up, around 2016, I got to know Shane Baker and Dr. Pat Heist at
Oh,
Wilderness
oh yeah.
Trail. And
Yes.
so this was before they had any whiskey out in the market. Everyone, if you've tried their whiskey, it's tremendously delicious. But
Absolutely.
this is before they had anything out in the market. So their oldest whiskey was 2 years old at this point. And so they were generous with their time, spent about 4 hours with me at their distillery. And I was just some knucklehead from Indiana wanting to build a distillery and wanting some advice, so they were, and they're just some of the best people in the industry. So they spent this full day with me, and but at the end, they kept talking about sweet mash, and their sweet mash process and why it's different. And to my ear, it sounded like a marketing thing, right? So I'm like, okay, so this is their angle of which, but probably doesn't make that big a difference. Boy, was I wrong. So I got into their first rick house, and if you've ever been to their distillery in Danville, Kentucky, they've got about 18, maybe now 20, 25,000 barrel Kentucky style rick houses. It's impressive to see, right? But to start, they had this little bitty rick house. They still have it there, and only holds about 1,000 barrels. So they took us crawling around in that and drilled a 2-year-old, their oldest whiskey at the time, which was a 2-year-old Wilderness Trail rye. Right. And it absolutely stopped me cold in my tracks. My brain could not understand why this whiskey was so complex and so rich and so deep and so soft at 2 years old. It wasn't like they had done any advanced aging or anything. It was a beautiful whiskey. It didn't need much subtraction. It really just needed more barrel to it. And so that really inspired me to learn more about sweet mashing. And then, of course, we worked with Shane and Pat from that moment forward in the design and build out of our distillery. So if you've been to Wilderness Trail and you come to Hard Truth, you're going to see a very similar system as their first. We've got a Vendome continuous column. We're 100% sweet mash, which in the most simple terms means fresh water, fresh grain, and fresh yeast every single mash in. So what that does for the whiskey itself is that it gives the grain an opportunity to shine in a way that people don't often expect a grain to shine. Some people, when they describe a whiskey as grainy, it's a bad thing, right? But with sweet mashing, you're able to bring out these incredibly high fruit notes out of your whiskey and this incredible sweetness because you're not muting it with that back set, which is essentially waste that you're feeding cattle. So that's a long way to tell you the story, but basically, the keys are there that, we're grain to glass. And, when I learned about sweet mash, I knew that was the path we wanted to go just from my palate and my flavor perspective. And then I knew that we could take it to the world and make something out of it.
Awesome. And let me tell you guys that are the ones that are listening, this will go out on YouTube, but the ones that are listening, this thing is unlike any bourbon that I've had in a good way. If you don't mind me asking, how it says straight bourbon, how old is this?
So that is just right over between 4 and 5 years, those barrels.
Okay. So it's go ahead.
So all of our batches are 30 barrels. So I hand select the barrels. That particular expression, the sweet mash bourbon in the black label. So I've got 4 bourbon mash bills and 4 rye mash bills. And the sweet mash bourbon, really, that particular mash bill is a pretty down the middle. It's a 73% corn, 19 rye, and the remainder malted barley. So it's more of kind of a familiar mash bill. But what we really did with that one is I knew I wanted one expression that we would bring down to around between 90 and 95 proof. I personally like my whiskey cask strength or at the minimum bottled in bond. But our bartender, bar and restaurant partners, really asked us with our rye whiskey and our bourbon. They said, "Hey, bring one in at a lower proof point so that it brings down the bottle cost. But then also, it's something to where we can serve multiple drinks and we're not knocking people off of the stool, with cask strength whiskey." So that's that expression. And I will tell you that as delicious as that is at 90 proof, and even at 90 proof, it's not a thin whiskey. It's very viscous. Got a nice mouthfeel. But that whiskey at cask strength is dynamite, brother. I'm telling you right now, we are going to offer that as a single barrel at cask strength at some point, maybe this next year. So that one's great. Then we have a wheated bourbon and a 4-grain bourbon, and those two we release at bottled in bond. So those are going to be around 5 years old and about 100 proof.
So I will tell you right now, if this is your baseline bourbon that you're making, it's freaking awesome. Like,
Thank you, buddy.
I mean, the 90 proof, you get it, but it's not overwhelming your palate. It's very soft and but it's viscous on your palate as well. And there's a lot of interesting. They're very bourbony notes. Obviously, that's some of that's coming from the barrel, but at the same time, it's very clean. I guess I could say it's very clean. Yeah. It's not like it's muddied up. I can taste the rye. I can taste the dusty cornness, but it's almost like it's not so much dusty. It's more like fresh corn, maybe, right. Like corn on the cob, but not like in that umami sort of way. It's more like, it's not like, because with a lot of bourbons, it's like you're open a feed sack and it's like that dust just hit you in the face. With this one, I feel it's a lot cleaner and it's a lot crisper. It's coming across really nice. I poured a very small amount because I just wanted to try it. We're not trying to get sauce on this show, but I had to go back and pour just a little bit more because I was like, hey, that's pretty interesting. It's giving me some good notes. So,
thanks, buddy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so cool that people like yourself and your company, and we can go into this as well. When people see Indiana whiskey, like you said, they're automatically going to think you're sourcing from MGP, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So is it, how do you get past that stigma of just because you're making Indiana whiskey doesn't mean it's MGP? Is it a marketing thing? Is it informing the customer, which obviously us talking like this informs customers, but how do you get past that stigma?
So one of the important things we want to do from a messaging standpoint, especially for, like when our bottles hit the shelves in Texas, right? So I can do these education sessions all we want. I can, we can talk to people on our campus, but you really have to tell the story on the bottle. So what you'll see on the front of all of our bottles, it'll say, let's see, it says it on every one of them: mashed, distilled, and aged in charred American oak barrels in Brown County, Indiana. So, one of the things that we like to talk about is our little slice of the rock that we all are living on. And absolutely. Brown County, Indiana is a beautiful place in Indiana. A lot of Indiana's flat farmlands. Brown County, southern Indiana, really is where the Laurentide ice sheet stopped and pulled back, and it left these big hills and hollers and beautiful deep hardwood forests. It's a gorgeous place. So we have 325 wooded acres. Wow. It's beautiful. We've got a 300 seat restaurant, 1,000-person outdoor music venue. We've got our production distillery. We do distillery tours, inside the barrel tours, mixology experiences. We do side-by-side ATV tours. We drive, you drink, where we go out and take the UTVs down into the hills and hollers, down to the creek beds and up the side. It's a riot, man. But we try to message right on the bottle. That instead of just saying distilled in Indiana, because that's really where you get in trouble. But distilled in Brown County, Indiana is where we try to make
so that is super cool. And when I, every time I have a guest on that's gracious enough to respond to me, but as you well know, trying to do something like this, you get 1,000 no's before you get a yes. So and again, I thank you again for coming on. But one of the things is I like to do a little background on the people I'm fixing to talk to, and one of the things that it said on your website or Wikipedia or somebody said was your facility, how amazing it was. It's an experience in itself, and you see that a lot, or not a lot, but in some of the areas in Kentucky where like it's a full-on experience. You take a little trolley and you do all the things, and you guys are doing something very similar, but in your own style. And that to me is super cool, because when you go to a distillery, sometimes you're not always a bunch of dudes, or, I know a bunch of women like to drink whiskey. I'm not saying that, but like normally it's a bunch of guys showing up at the bar. They want to pull from a barrel, have a drink, but sometimes maybe you have your wife with you and she doesn't really like whiskey and she just wants to go hang out, but like there's a band playing, we can go have a cocktail and sit and watch the band play or whatever. And I'm sure you guys, since you have a venue, I'm sure you have some some actual bands play and
Oh yeah.
some stuff like that. So give us a little bit of that of that. Like who have you had on online and stuff
Yeah.
like that?
Sure. So, it's funny that you mentioned the experiences in Kentucky. So in 2016, when we were trying to figure out again what we were going to build on this property, we went down to Kentucky because we're only about an hour and 15 minutes north of Louisville. So we're really
Okay.
we're right there. So we
Right.
have limestone bedrock aquifers that we pull our water from.
Right.
Very similar climate. I mean, we're kind of right there. So we took about a year and went down to Kentucky, and we did every tour multiple times.
Okay.
And this is what I will tell you in 2016. First of all, everyone should go do all of the tours. The history, the beauty, everything there is really unmatched for
Right.
what it is, right? But I'll be honest with you, at that time, a lot of these experiences were very similar. And once you had been on 2 or 3 or 4 of them, it was
Right.
kind of like, well, okay,
Been there,
the
done that.
liquid's
Yeah.
great, the history's cool, but I don't know why I would go back again necessarily unless I wanted to share it with somebody else, right?
Right.
So that was one thing that we took away was, okay, we're not coming with 200 years plus years of history,
Right.
but what we do have is we don't have we're not trapped by the paradigm of the way you have to do it for Kentucky bourbon. We
Mhm.
also are not trapped by archaic dry county laws, which is a big reason why a lot of those tours in the past have been so boring. I mean,
Right.
some of these distilleries you couldn't even drink in the county that the distillery was producing
Right.
hundreds of thousands of barrels of whiskey, right?
Right.
So we talked with our Indiana excise and the ATF immediately, and we said we want to be able to drink anywhere on this 325 acres. We want our
Right.
customers to. So the way we set it up, and my partners, they had already, they'd been in the brewery business. They had at that time, I think, 6 bars and restaurants in the state of Indiana. So
Wow.
they were really in the business of experiences,
Right.
entertainment,
Mhm.
hosting people. So they had a different view of how we were going to do this. So
Right.
they took that part of it. I took the liquid part, and now when you come on our property, just to give you an idea, even though we're a young brand, we have last year we had over 400,000 visitors at our distillery. This is
Holy crap.
we are one of the most visited, if not the most visited distillery in the United States. And it's because you can think of our property as, first of all, it's family friendly.
Okay.
To your point, we have experiences for everybody. It's a park-like atmosphere, so you can park your car and wander around. You can hit one of our our tour center and go to the bar there and grab a cocktail. Walk right out the front door with your cocktail. Go on a path walking around a lake. Come
Love
around to
that.
the terraces where the music is. Listen to live music. Get another cocktail there. Maybe get some chicken wings.
There you go.
We've got under 21 access pretty much everywhere except for the tours because by law they have to be
Right.
21 and older. But really, yeah, to your point, we really wanted to kind of blow up people's perception of what a distillery tour was and
Right.
and offer something new, and it's worked really well. And we do have other products besides whiskey, so that also helps if we've got somebody that's not into whiskey. But now that we've got this grain and glass whiskey out in the market, we're getting we're getting the group of guys that are heading from Chicago down to the Bourbon Trail, and they
Mhm.
take a 15-minute detour off of I-65 and come and spend a day with us. And then we have bachelorette parties, a lot of them,
Yes.
a lot
That's
of them.
awesome. I
Every
love that.
Saturday, I would imagine we have probably on average on a fair weather weekend, we have 5 to 8 bachelorette parties on our property.
Holy guacamole. That's amazing.
It's a fun
I
place.
love that. I love
Yep.
that. I love that because it's really whiskey's for everybody. And I know
Yeah.
everybody thinks that's, your granddad's drink. That's, all the things, all the stereotypes that go with whiskey, but it's for, if you can I used the example when I was talking about my wife, because I've been into whiskey for a long time. I've tried to get her into Irish whiskey. Maybe she would like that, or rye whiskey. Here's a cocktail with some, maybe some whiskey in it. She couldn't do any of it, right?
Yeah.
And so then I gave her a peated scotch and said, "Here, try this." No, she didn't like that either. But
Right.
so for her, she's like, "I want to go do the things with you, like, because I like, you're happy, I'm happy." But at the same time, if somebody like you're saying, if you have other things there, not only to do, because like you say, once you've seen a rick house, you've seen a rick house, but like other things to do, it just makes the experience that much better for everyone involved. As a whiskey nerd, I'm going to be happy just standing in the barrel warehouse, just looking at all the barrels, right? But for everybody else, and like you say, being kid friendly, that makes more people want to come, because they're like, hey, I don't have to get a sitter, I don't have to worry about it. We just go up there, we have our a fun day. And if more distilleries were like your guys's, I think it would be more of a social thing, because I feel like there's a pretty big stigma on whiskey itself. And I try to advocate for whiskey being like it is a social drink, but like being more like in the beer realm, where like people go and they just go drink beer, which I understand whiskey is a higher proof and there's all the things that go with it, but like getting in more social settings with whiskey involved. And obviously we'll talk about some of your other products that you make as well, but it's just having all of that there for everybody. So hey, you don't like whiskey, here's a brandy, or here's gin, or whatever, we got something for you. Don't leave, have some hot wings, you'll be fine.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and it's kind of, to your point, there's a destigmatization. And I wouldn't say that we were inspired by, what they've done in Napa, but, it's kind of like that. It's a place where if it's a beautiful Saturday, you can go to a winery in Napa with your whole family, and there's food, there's music, there's fun stuff for the kids, there's fun stuff for the adults. Everybody's got room to spread out. It's beautiful. There's some great drink. You can meet people. That's the vibe that we have at our place. So on a tomorrow, on Saturday, nice weather Saturday, which is not going to be a nice Saturday, but nonetheless, we got a hurricane swirling, getting ready to swirl on top of us. But we'll have 2,000 to 3,000 people at any given time on the property. So if you think about that, and no one's crowded, right? So we've got a lot of places to move around. So I encourage anyone, and also for the people that aren't whiskey people, all distill. So we are a privately held company. All of our growth has been bank funded and cash flow, funded with our cash flow. But like most people, we had to start with something to make money. A lot of brands will start with borrowed whiskey. They'll start with MGP, and then they'll slowly start to blend in their whiskey, and then hopefully everything goes well, because their whiskey is not going to taste the same, but whatever. We didn't want to go down that path, and so I developed several non-whiskey spirits, non-aged spirits that, we weren't really sure whether they would stick once we got our whiskey out or whatever. But let me tell you, our toasted coconut rum, Hard Truth toasted coconut rum, is absolutely a crusher. It is our number one selling SKU in every single state. It crushes in Texas, it crushes in Florida, it crushes in New York. If you are someone who maybe you don't even think you like coconut whiskey or coconut rum, this is the spirit was inspired by my grandmother's coconut cream pie. And so what you'll find about what I like to do with food and with spirit is I just like to find the best ingredients I can find, and then make the best version of whatever we're making, right? So with this coconut rum, first of all, its main competitor, Malibu, isn't. You don't really want to sip on it straight, right? But with this, we actually I get Caribbean, I get Black Pearl Select Caribbean molasses, I get raw cane sugar. We ferment, double pot distill the rum in our distillery. I get organic coconut chips, roast them in a convection oven until they're nice dark brown. Let that rest in the spirit, pull it out, sweeten it with pure cane sugar and a little sea salt. This rum is incredible. So
sounds amazing.
It's great. So for all the fans out there, if you go to hardtruth.com, we got one of those little spirit finder widgets. with a little drop down menu. So you can check whichever spirit you want to look for and put in your zip code, and it will absolutely show you where you can get it. Texas is a little bit weird because of the fourth tier.
Yes.
The bars and restaurants don't really show up on there.
Right.
But you can we are definitely well distributed in the major areas of
Okay.
around the cities of Texas with
Okay.
all of our spirits.
Total Wine specs, stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And if
Okay.
we're not, ask for us at your local place. That really
absolutely.
that helps the
That's
most.
the big one. That's the big one. And I will have all of Hard Truth stuff in the description down below. So please go look at all that and make sure you give them. He gone. All right, we had a little mishap. We're back. So go to Hard Truth. I'll have it linked down below. Go get some of that coconut rum. It sounds amazing. My wife, she used to drink rum and Coke. Like the coconut rum and Coke, and she loves that. So she might enjoy that. So while we were having our hiccup, I opened and poured out the Mellencamp, the French Oak Harvest Rye. I'm going to show the listeners.
It's actually what I'm sipping on this evening myself.
Okay, so this one intrigues me. Now, this one is coming in at 104 proof.
Right.
And it says Hard Truth Distilling Company, Mellencamp Whiskey Company collaboration. So that's very interesting. So we're talking the Cougar. Oh, he doesn't go by the Cougar anymore. So
the Cougs, you can call them anything you want now, I think. But yeah, so Brown County, Indiana is very close to Bloomington, which is actually where I live, and where John has lived for a great portion of his life, and from Seymour, which is right down the road. So
right.
So for those of you, your listeners who maybe aren't familiar, John Mellencamp not only is a international rock star from way back in the day, but he and Willie Nelson and Neil Young founded Farm Aid in 1985. So Farm Aid is still going strong to this day. Last weekend, it was in Saratoga Springs, New York, the festival. And what they do is they raise money to support education for sustainable farming, but also to support family farming and family farmers. So I had laid down some whiskey, a little over 4 years ago, that was 100% grains from our two main farming partners. Okay. So I didn't use any malted barley because barley doesn't grow great in Indiana. And so I did two mash bills. One was a rye mash bill and one was a bourbon mash bill. So this rye mash bill is 72% rye from Dwayne Kuhlenschmidt and 28% corn from Doug Miller. And these are both my two main farmers. And so I didn't really have a plan. I just thought, at some point in time, I want to celebrate these guys and their family and what they do. And so I laid that whiskey down. Then let's fast forward to February of 2023. I get this just a random email from a guy named Hud Mellencamp. And it said, "Hey, we are starting a whiskey company and we'd like to talk to you." So I thought, all right, so we're not in the private label business. I'm not in the celebrity attachment business. I don't do collaborations, but just like anybody else, if you reach out to me specifically and say you want to know more about our business, I will meet you at the door and we will walk around and talk business. So I met Hud and Levi, Hud Mellencamp and Levi Collison, and we walked around the property, and I didn't, told them about how we make whiskey. We tasted some whiskey, asked them what their goals were. And these were just some really genuine, humble guys. And they said, "You know what? We are, we're getting to the age where we want to start something for ourselves, for our own lives. We've all got our thing going, but we really want to do something. And we love the whiskey world. And we love what you're doing at Hard Truth, but we don't want to do anything big and splashy. We just want, even if we're just distributed in Bloomington, Indiana, we'll be happy. We just want to work with local producers. We want to celebrate local farmers and craftspeople in Indiana." And so I thought, wow, well, that's a different approach, because I'm thinking at this time, everybody's thinking about that celebrity, someone's going to be the next George Clooney and sell their company for $1 billion. But, so these weren't those guys. And then we vibed and ended up learning that, where Hud grew up was literally less than a mile down the road from where I live for 15,
That is
20
so
years. So
crazy. That is so
yeah,
crazy.
so really liked meeting those guys. I knew that it would be a long shot to actually put together a business deal that would work.
Right.
But damn it if we didn't do it. And so along the way, when we were getting a little closer, I talked to them about this whiskey that I'd laid down. And I said, we're just launching this grounded in. So on the side, you'll see where it says grounded in truth.
Yes.
And that is our give back, our cause marketing,
Right.
where we want to give a portion back to organizations that support family farmers. And in
Right.
fact, jokingly, when we were coming up with Grounded in Truth, we were like, well, maybe we can meet John and somehow get involved with Farm Aid, right? And it was
Right.
as a joke because we never thought it was going to happen. And then next
Right.
thing you know, HUD Mellencamp's knocking on our door. So this is what you have in front of you is number 3 of a 4-part collector's series of whiskeys, each of which are completely unique mash bill, unique expression that's only exists in this whiskey. And on the label art, if you look at the label art, each label features an original painting from John Mellencamp. So on top of being a
Oh,
rock
wow.
star, he's also an incredible painter. So
Wow.
this is a self-portrait that he did. John does not drink, ironically,
Okay.
but he was very supportive of the project because it's first of all it supports his son, but also it helps to support family farmers. And so
Absolutely.
a portion of proceeds from each of these bottles goes directly to Farm Aid
That's
to fund
amazing.
their efforts. Yeah.
That really is amazing. And I will have the link to the Grounded in Truth as well, so that they can
Yes.
go, if they and can you donate on there, I'm guessing?
You can, and
Okay.
these bottles are a little bit harder to find because
Right.
there's very very few of them out there. I will tell you though that there are some. If you go to our website, we've got some links to some online retailers that you can
Okay.
get a bottle.
Okay.
But again, it's on our Spirit Finder, and you can find them.
Awesome.
There's actually some still. I was in New York last week, and there was still some couple bottles of batch 1 floating around and a few bottles of
Mm.
batch 2. So what's cool is each one's a completely unique piece of art. So the 4, and then the 4th one will come out next spring.
Okay.
But then this will create basically a nice little artwork collectible set.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
buy 2, one to drink and one to collect. That's what I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're gonna do it right.
Yeah.
That to me is so cool. And let me tell you. And I mean, I feel like I know you well enough now. We've been talking for 30 minutes, but
Sure.
I feel like I know you well enough now to know your whiskey. And to me, this rye is a very atypical rye, but at the same time, again, being that it's a sweet mash, and I don't know how many sour mash ryes there are out there. I don't know if they're all like that or not, but this one is not so much that cinnamon allspice. It's more like almost a little cooling, and then it is on French oak, toasted French oak, so you
Yes.
get that like marshmallowiness as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
So it's almost, I don't know, it's very confectionery to me. It's
Yeah.
very nice. Like I would, having this like 2 months ago when it was over 100 degrees, I would have really enjoyed this with a nice ice ball on it, because I feel like it
Oh,
would be
yeah.
very cooling, but also, and the 104 proof doesn't come over like yes, it's a little hotter than the other one, but it's nowhere near, it's punching well above its weight class. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Thank you very much. One thing that you'll find about all of our rye whiskey, I mean, our bourbon is tremendous, but I would say that our rye whiskey especially is very differentiating from everything else on the shelf. And
Yeah.
to your point of being confectionery, man, we have a very dessert forward flavor profile in all of our ryes, and it comes from that sweet mash process, but also the yeast strain that I use.
Okay.
When our rye whiskeys are fermenting, they're really wild. The smell from the fermentation is really unique.
Hmm.
Not always the most pleasant, I would say.
Right.
There's sometimes you get into those, those bourbon ferments, and they're very cereally and
Right.
beautiful. And
Right.
this rye ferment is funky and it
That's
is
awesome.
pungent. But I will tell you, when this rye whiskey comes off of that still as new make, and to your point before, talking about the the
Right.
cleanness of the flavor profile, this rye whiskey comes off, and I mean, it's like guava and papaya. It's like these
Oh man.
real funky tropical fruits, a lot of sweetness, a lot of heavy fruit. And then in the barrel, once it sits in the barrel for a while, the first barrel,
Right.
those fruits turn to like peach
Right.
and apricot and some
Hmm.
cherry. But all of our rye whiskeys are very kind of desserty. So
Yes.
if you did a double blind with some like the major rye whiskeys out in the world, most people are used to herbal,
Right.
spicy,
Right.
maybe a little bit grassy,
Hmm.
but savory for the most part,
Right.
right? And
Yes.
these are really sweet. I mean,
Yes.
they're really, really sweet.
They are.
All of them
They
are.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. And that's what's so cool. And we can talk about this as well. But like changing one thing in the process.
Mm.
One thing in the process. It could be, I mean, you guys are changing multiple things, obviously, because you're getting locally sourced grains and all the things. So like, everybody talks about terroir in wine, but they don't really talk about it in whiskey. They're starting to.
Right.
And really, like, I'm seeing it in Texas whiskey, especially. Everybody's like, hey, we have Panhandle up here, which is doing this, and then we have a Gulf Coast is doing this, and
I love
Central
it.
Texas is doing this, and they're so different. It's like the
Yeah.
5 regions of Scotland, like you're getting totally different whiskeys, but like terroir is a thing. And so like getting locally sourced, which me being, a granola person, loving organic things and locally sourced and knowing where your stuff is coming from, right?
Mhm.
That to me, you can name me the farmer that made the grain that went into this whiskey. That
Yes.
to me it's not some commodity grain that
Right.
everybody is getting. You were getting, and I'm sure there's other people getting. They I don't know if they locally only just work with you guys, but still, it's to the point of like you guys care about what you put in the bottle, and it shows in the glass, obviously, but like also it just makes for a whole experience because you know that what you guys put into it is coming through, but it's also, I don't know, it's paying homage back to Indiana and back to the
Yes.
roots that you guys have. And to me, the French oak on this as well, which as you well know, French oak is a pretty amazing finishing product to begin with. And I feel like,
It's great.
and let me know if you agree, rye whiskey works so good finished, no matter what you do with it.
It absolutely does. It also works great in cocktails. I mean,
Yeah.
bourbon just gets lost in most
Mhm.
cocktails
Mhm.
or in most finishes, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Now, I've had some tremendously delicious finished bourbons. Don't get me
Yes.
wrong.
Yes.
But on the whole, I agree with you because rye, it's so bold and it's big and it's
It
you
is.
got to reckon with it, right? So you can soften its edges in different ways that really, let the core of the whiskey still shine through, but then you're adding these different nuances to it. And I
Right.
want to go back to something that you said because I
Please do.
really I got to tell you, you're really onto something here, and I really feel so excited, and I love you telling me about that people are talking about even the different regions within Texas.
Right.
I mean, I'd not heard that before, but that makes me so excited to be a part of what's happening right now in American whiskey. I'm
Absolutely.
telling you, mark my words, we will look back on this time in American whiskey making as really something special, kind of like what
Yes.
happened in American beer with craft
Yes.
beer. I
Absolutely.
mean,
Absolutely.
Europe and the whole rest of the world
Mhm.
all of a sudden turned their heads and they were like,
Yes.
whoa, what
What
is
the
going
heck's
on over
going on?
there? This is
Yes.
incredible. And then they started doing those styles, right? So
Mhm.
I really believe that the same thing's happening here, but even more artistry. And it's just such a fun industry. And
It
if you
is.
if you can't have a good time, making and enjoying whiskey,
No.
you can't have a good time. I'm
No.
convinced of it.
No. No.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's because it's hard. It's hard, like, because you have to think about production, right? But you also have to understand it's a job. But then again, if you're not having fun with what you're doing, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
That goes back to my original question, the why. Why even get into this? Why even start this? Because if you're not in it for the love, the money will come eventually, yes. But
Sure.
if you're not in it for the love of the game and the love of the what's in the glass,
Mm.
then you're not doing it the right way. Because I see so many, and luckily, knock on wood, I would say, I haven't had any of them on the show yet, and I'm pretty deep in the game right now, and that are just doing it for the dollar. They're not doing it for the flavor. Even people who don't distill their own product, they're non-distiller producers, which I have no problem with that. They are very transparent about it. They're doing all the right resources to get the thing, and then they're like blending it and making it their own. Sure. That to me shows some, you're trying to change it up a little bit. But like the people that don't care, they're just there for the dollar. They're there for the, we're going to make a bottom shelf whiskey that is just made to use in a cocktail. Like it that part hurts my heart, but this makes my heart so full because you guys care. And again, I go back to the other people, and I don't want to talk about other people I've had on, but like a lot of the people that want to talk to me are the more grassroots. Like we're doing it the wrong way, according to everybody else. We're doing it the wrong way. Like when I talk to Mia, I don't know if you know Mia from JT Melick.
I don't. I do not.
They do rice whiskey, so it's rice whiskey.
You know what? I've actually tasted it, and it's delicious.
It is
freaking delicious.
It's rice whiskey out of Louisiana, right? They have a rice farm and all the things. Anyway, we're not talking about her, but she is so on fire for her brand, and I feel like you are as well. And that to me gives me hope, because everybody has been talking about bourbon and whiskey in itself is going to take a dip here pretty soon, because it could be election driven or just the sign of the times. There's like a temperance movement kind of coming into play. But if they were able to get some of this in their glass right now, they would change their mind about that. Now, I know you've had this in barrel for a minute. It's not like you just, you just distilled this yesterday. And that's another thing that we could get into if you want to. Like, how do you prepare for the future in the glass? Because like you said, hey, you were laying barrels down. You didn't know what they were going to taste like. Like, how do you, obviously, the distillate coming off the still is pretty freaking good. So you're like, okay, obviously you guys have a pretty tight cut ratio and stuff like that. And you're good at using good cooperages and stuff like that. And if you want to get into who you use and stuff, we would appreciate that. But like, how do you know the whiskey's going to be good? And how do you know how long to leave it in the barrel, basically?
It's a great question.
Long story.
No, you're good. So I'll go back to kind of my start in this. It's fun to look back through the lens of 9 years now. But I really, I was a guy who had an opportunity in front of him that wasn't a fully formed thought yet. It was just kind of an opportunity, right? And so the way that I approached this whiskey making endeavor is the same way that I approach creating food. Okay, so I'm an only child. I was an only grandchild. My grandmother, I'm so fortunate that she spent a lot of time with me when I was very little, and she would have me in her kitchen. She was a tremendous cook, and I know everyone's got a great grandma that was a great cook, but I mean, I'm talking like next level. This woman really, she didn't get recognition for how good she was until now when I get to tell her story. But I'm telling you, she was incredible. Plus, she had, but here's the key: 2 things. First of all, I watched how people responded to her feeding them. The emotional response that she would evoke out of people. I mean, I was paying attention. I'm like, oh my God, like this is something else, right? This isn't just normal human emotion. This is like a different level thing. So I can't say that I had that in the front of my brain, but it definitely was back here. But then the other thing is my grandfather, he was World War II vet. They had Victory Garden, right? Just like almost everybody did at that time. So my grandmother had this incredible wealth of, food that my grandfather was growing in their backyard.
Right.
That was, highest quality ingredients. So she was making food with the highest quality ingredients, and she didn't have to do too much to it because it was already there. She
It
just
was
let the
already good.
ingredient, she let the ingredient shine, right?
Right.
Then I was also fortunate on my other side of my family to have an aunt who was born in Japan. And if you're familiar with
Oh,
Japanese cooking, it's a very similar philosophy where
it is.
you spare no expense on the ingredient,
No.
and but then just let the ingredient do its thing, right? So
Hmm.
I, now looking back through the lens of time, whenever over the span of my life, I had a huge passion for cooking. Never had the balls to be a chef or a restaurateur
Absolutely.
because
Yeah,
that's a
I hear
whole
you.
different thing. But I love to create food. I love to feed people.
All right, guys, it's getting that time of the year. You know, the time of the year when you're thinking, maybe I want a whiskey cocktail, right? Well, I got the perfect solution for you. My buddies over at Hinterhouse Distilling, they came out with this new holiday spirit called the Warming Hut. And this is going to be released on Black Friday. Yeah, the day after Thanksgiving. And thank you, Hinterhouse, for sending this over for me to try and sample and let you guys know how amazing it is because I've already dipped into it a little bit. So it's a whiskey, right? A bourbon whiskey, but it has grape wine in it and it has some flavorings added to it to give it. It just makes it almost like a liqueur at the end of the day. So it's super nice on the nose. I'm not going to do a whole bunch of tasting notes on it, right? Mm. But the chocolate, there's chocolate for days at the end of this. You put this on an ice ball, oh, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. So head over to hinterhostdistilling.com and get you a bottle of this. Obviously, you have to do it after Black Friday, right? They're having a Black Friday extravaganza like everybody is, right? Go over there, pick you up a bottle of this. It's a 375, and they do have pretty good shipping. So look, make sure they can ship in your area. But this is an amazing product, and you need to go pick it up right now. Go do it. Hurry up. Y'all be good. Peace.
Always
Yeah.
have, still do. Um, and so what I did is I just did what I do there and I
Hmm.
translated it to whiskey making, but I had this other layer, which is I've always been the most curious, scientifically minded kid. Like right from the fourth grade, I was in all
Yeah.
the science fairs. To your point about changing one variable, when I learned the scientific process and that you could like experiment and change a
Hmm.
variable and then measure what the difference was, man, I was like, oh my God, this how much fun is that, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
when whiskey making is this beautiful mix of those two things.
Right.
And then aren't, if you trust your instincts and if you educate yourself to really get the kind of background knowledge to know that you're going to make something good and then don't get in your own way, I think you
Right.
can make something good. And I've been consuming more kind of, you know, content and information and books and things were a little more philosophical, and
Yes.
and I heard something that Rick Rubin talked about where that any kind of great art, you don't have the outcome in mind when you start it.
Right.
You just do what you do
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
do it the best that you can,
Hmm.
and then maybe somebody will like it, maybe they won't, but you've done it. You've done the
Right.
thing, right? So
Yeah.
really, I was fortunate enough to have partners who let me do my thing, but also hire and build out a team of very talented, passionate artisans that I give them the space to do their thing. Now, when we
Right.
make whiskey, we make it very
Right.
it stays within the bounds, but to give everybody the freedom to really to do their thing and to do it well, and then the business part of it, which is the sales and marketing and all that, that's the hard stuff, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
we're
For
making
sure.
whiskey
Right.
making's fun. I mean,
Right.
it's awesome. So yeah, I think that all those things going into it make for something that to your point, what's in this glass is not replicable. I mean,
Right.
this is it, right? And so
That's it.
for people who are drinking less, they're going to be more choosy about what they
Hmm.
do put in their glass, and I think
Yes.
they're going to want something more interesting, something more authentic. And so we're really happy to be in a position to offer that and to kind of stay through whatever course this industry is going to take, which, it's always cyclical.
Yes.
I really don't believe that we're in a big cycle where everybody's going to change their plans. I think there's a
Right.
lot of things, whether it be cannabis or whether it's, a hangover from COVID
Right.
or the fact that no one has any more room on their shelf, right now. And so I think I'm going to start this new, like, a new viral campaign where I'm gonna talk everybody into making, like, remember, what was it, jungle juice or something? I'm gonna
Yes.
convince everybody, if your bottle is less than a third full, it is your duty to drain that bottle however you see fit.
Oh Lord.
Don't overconsume, but share it with people, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yes.
and then let's move on and try new things, because there's a lot of tremendous whiskey out in the world right now.
There is.
Yeah.
And so that I mean, I feel like we're jiving. That leads me to my next question. Like,
Sure.
so obviously you guys are making some excellent whiskeys and stuff like that. What is a whiskey outside of y'all's brand that you go to? I mean, either a special pour, you can go that route, or just a day drinker type whiskey. Like for me, I'll just throw my, which I don't have a daily drinker.
Sure.
I drink for the show a little bit, and then maybe a couple on the weekend, whatever. But like a daily drinker or like a special pour. Like some people love the Elijah Craig barrel proofs or whatever.
Yeah.
Just let me know.
Sure. Mezcal. That's where I'm gonna go.
Okay, so that was my next question, but
for the people who are out there, I will tell you about some whiskeys too, but for the people who out there who are, learning about what's happening in the world of true artisans and craftspeople, the world of mezcal is just incredibly fascinating. And I mean, you can go down to the bottom of never find the bottom of that wormhole. Also, additive free, real deal tequila. Holy smokes, man. So for me as a whiskey maker, I'm evaluating a lot of whiskey. I love whiskey, don't get me wrong. But sometimes it is work to me. It tastes like work, right? So I do enjoy a great pour of a true craft artisan tequila or mezcal. But that being said, I'm really impressed with what's coming out of Still Austin.
Thank you.
I am so.
I had nothing to do with it.
Shout out to Texas. I met some folks last time I was in Texas from Iron Root that shared some of their whiskey with me.
Love
delicious,
the Brothers.
Delicious. But I'll say, for just like, if my dad's coming over,
right,
and we're gonna just kind of maybe have a session with some, and I'll tell you. So growing up, it was George Dickel, number 9, and it was ginger ale, and it was a glass with ice. And it was, in my family, we called it the Dickel Tickle, and we still do. And that is a tremendous pour, and I can hurt myself on that from time to time.
I'm sure.
But I will say that for a daily drinker, nothing fancy. I love, if you get down to Kentucky, and they've got the Old Bardstown in several different labels, but there's one label that you can only get in Kentucky. It's in the little kind of Jack Daniel's square-shaped bottle, and it's Old Bardstown. It's out of the Willett Distillery. It's their own distillate, and it's their bottled in bond, the white label with the little horsey. Please tell me you have it back there. There it is, brother. That whiskey right there is 23. It's $23.95 in Kentucky at all times, and it is freaking delicious.
It really, obviously it is. And see, everybody always bitches at me because I have all these empty bottles behind me. Okay, so I know you've seen other whiskey people, and they have this wall of whiskey. I'm like, this is the shit that I've already tried. Like I have other whiskey that I haven't tried yet, but like this is the stuff I've tried, and I can tell you this is good, this is not good. Like I go back to this, I can tell you the time, the date, the place, all the things.
Well, I love our bourbon, and I think we're making tremendous bourbon. But for me, if someone just said, like, what's something that's readily available, that's not expensive, that
Right.
is going to give me the essence of the bourbon. For me, that
Mhm.
expression highlights the corn so
Yes, it
well.
does. It really
It's
does.
so rounded. It's not green. Oh man, it's good. Really,
Yeah.
really good.
Awesome.
So yeah.
So I was nervous when you were saying what you were saying because I was like, is that the one I have? Please let it be the
Yeah,
one I
it
have.
is.
But
It is.
and so for me, that was a splurge bottle because I had to have it muled to me because obviously being
Yeah,
Texas, it's a Kentucky only, and
sure.
I'm part of this bourbon group,
Yeah.
and I was able to get that one, J.W. Dant or J.D.
Oh yeah.
Dant,
Yeah.
and what was the other one? It was another Kentucky only bottle and bond.
Yeah. It
And
was Heaven. Was it Heaven Hill 6 year bottled in bond? That's a
it
good one
might it
too.
it might have been. It might have been. But anyway, yeah, no, they're all that's the thing. It's kind of like, and I don't know if you dip into Canadian whiskey, but
Mhm.
I recently had found North, which they are
Mm,
a non-distiller producer, and they take
right.
Canadian whiskey, which is super high, like 22-year old, like super
Wow.
age stated, and they blend it and do cool stuff with it. But Canadian whiskey is kind of like that. Like
Mhm.
everybody thinks of Canadian whiskey as Crown Royal, right? Crown Royal, Seagrams, or whatever.
Sure.
Um, all their whiskey they keep in Canada because they're
Ah,
greedy. They're greedy
right.
Canadians.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. They're
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
the nicest people in the world, and I'm talking
Yeah.
crap about them. But they
Aggressively, they're aggressively polite, I would say.
absolutely. And so they make some amazing single malts, which if you're not into single malt, I get it. But like
Sure.
they make some amazing single malts, but they keep them in Canada because
Yeah.
for one, they think that the American palate only likes Crown Royal. So it's
Mhm.
so I was
Yeah.
able to get some bottles, muled to me, whatever.
That's
Yeah, I mean,
awesome.
you can't ship whiskey, so don't
Right.
think you can do that. But
Right. Yeah.
it's just so cool. There's so much cool whiskey out there that
There
nobody
is.
knows about because it's so regionalized. So
Right.
we are. I'm not trying to let you go because we have this other whiskey to get into, but I
Sure.
have to ask the question. You are in
Sure.
Southern Indiana, and this might be a hot topic item. And if you don't want to discuss it, I can. We are not
Sure.
live.
No, we're good.
One of my friends is Alan Bishop.
Oh yeah. Sure. I know
Okay.
Alan really
Okay.
well. Yeah.
He is now working with Old Homestead Distilling,
Oh, I know him
and
very well. And I
okay,
know Joe.
okay,
I know Joe Lee. I know all
okay,
those
okay,
folks.
okay,
Oh
okay.
yeah.
So I will tell you, I don't know how much Southern you are, but if you're in that area, you're in his background.
So yeah.
And one of the things that he's talked to me at length about is apple brandy
Is there
and
anything that
Southern.
Alan doesn't talk at length about? First of all, was there a
Okay,
subject?
you're right. You're right there.
I
You're right
love him.
there.
He's the
But
best. He's the
okay,
most
okay.
knowledgeable. He was forgotten more than I'll ever know about
Okay,
the
so
history.
so
Yeah,
I'm glad you said that because I
yeah,
didn't want to bring it up, being that you guys are close by. I didn't
sure.
want there to be like some weird relationship,
No,
or something. But I'm glad to hear that. But
yeah,
so in your other SKUs that you guys have on premises, is there an
yeah.
apple brandy?
There is not. I
And why not?
really. So it's funny because when so our brewery,
Hmm.
I say it's a different company, but some of the same owners. But Quaffon
Right,
Brewing Company, they do a beer every year that's called Hesitation Point, and it's
right.
kind of like a cider lager kind of hybrid. And
Okay.
they get some apples, some kind of the apples that aren't the prettiest to sell,
Right,
and
right.
that usually get pressed into cider,
The
and
good ones.
they'll ferment and add that in. And so I always think about Alan because I'm always like, well, maybe I can get a tote and do. And then I'm like, you know what, between Alan was Spirits French Lick before, and now it's Old
Right.
Homestead, and then between one of my good college buddies, Jason Heiligenberg, who's
Hmm.
one of the distillers at Starlight.
Oh yes,
um,
absolutely.
they both those guys make tremendous brandy. I mean, a tremendous apple brandy, incredible
Absolutely.
apple brandy. I've
Absolutely.
actually had some from Starlight that's like really old, like before I think they legally had still old.
Right. Yeah.
And man, and then the history of the Black Forest of Indiana, Southern Indiana, and all that. So You know, we got enough on our hands with this toasted coconut rum and all
Yes.
these beautiful whiskeys. I'm going to
Yeah.
leave the brandy making to Alan and to Jason and to Ted Huber and his sons. But
Yes.
I will say, so I love Alan to death, and unfortunately, he and I don't get to spend as much time together as I wish we could, just because we're both real busy. But
Right.
and I love Jolie Casper's actually so
Oh God.
funny,
Yes, he's amazing.
hysterically funny.
Mhm.
But in fact, so I did get to do a single barrel pick for the bourbon on the banks, the
Bourbon on the-
Frankfurt Bourbon Society, and with all those guys, AMZ winning and all of them, and it was just a riot. We had so much fun. But one of the things that I always tease Alan about is because he's such a proselytizer about pot still
Yes.
whiskey making. And so, and we have a 14-inch continuous column from Vendome,
Right.
and what I will tell you is that my goal was, that I'm pretty sure I did okay on, is keeping the body of the whiskey in the
Absolutely.
whiskey with a column still. So what I've joked with Alan about is that someday I want he and I to get some Lucador masks, and I want to do like column still guy versus pot still guy, and do some sort of thing. So I'm still talking to him about it, but in the meantime, he's heading up all kinds of projects at Spring Mill and all this cool stuff. So my hope is that Alan and I get to do more together in the future, but he is salt of the earth again. An incredible repository of history of distilling, period, but history of distilling in Indiana. So I'm from Evansville originally. So my grandparents, as a kid, we would drive up and down that 64 corridor. And my grandfather's father was from Germany. And so, all those German settlements and immigrants that are down there, my whole life was built around learning about that, and then to connect in the world of distilling with that, which I was unaware of, through Alan, has been awesome. He's if anybody that is listening to this has not looked up the Alchemist Cabinet, Alan Bishop, or the Alan Bishop Experience, whatever you can consume of his content, go get it. He is a legend. He is a living legend for sure.
And that's not just because he's been on the show and I have all of his books in the back. I didn't even
know that. I had no idea there was a connection there with you and Alan. That's
absolutely
awesome.
No, I've been on his Distillers Talk and his If You Have Ghost podcast 3 times.
Oh, that's so cool.
Because I've had some spooky things going on, but that's not what this show is about. Even though they heard about it too, but it's fine. But I will tell you this, and we're going to get off Alan because he has a big enough head as it is. And I love you, Alan. If you're listening to this, I love you, Brett. But it's one of those things where, like, being true to your roots, what like you guys are doing and like Alan's doing, he's way true. Like he's talking 1800s true, but that's a little bit different. He's like growing the sunflowers that are going in his moonshine. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Unbelievable.
There's hardcore, and then there's like Alan Bishop. Anyway, but so while we were talking during all this, I opened up the last bottle, and it was the Barrel Finish Reserve Sweet Mash Rye Double Oaked.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, okay, so I will tell you right now, I have seen, and this is a shameless plug for you, I guess, I have seen a number of very influential whiskey Instagrammer, YouTuber people with this bottle, and they have, I try not to let it influence me because I don't let other people influence my thoughts.
Right.
But they've had the highest marks on this. So tell us a little bit about this. I mean, I know what a double oak is, obviously.
Right.
But is this the same thing as the Harvest Rye, or is this different?
So
Obviously,
this is our mash bill 1. So somewhere on the bottle it should say RW1, which is our rye whiskey 1. That's our rye whiskey mash bill number 1. That is, so if anyone's had our dark green label sweet mash rye, that's the same mash bill. That's RW1, which is 94% rye, 6% malted barley. Because if it were 95.5 and made in Indiana, you would never believe that I made it. Right?
Absolutely. I love that.
I love that. I really truly love that 95.5 mash bill, and so
Yeah.
it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek nod to that mash bill. But at the same time, our 94.6 tastes nothing like MGP 95.5.
No.
It's those big bold fruits, a lot of sweetness, a lot of richness, a lot of body. So we took that mash bill, and this is like a little non sequitur that's not in the marketing materials about our double oaked. So I'll just tell you the truth right here.
Do it.
Breaking news on
Breaking news.
on your pod. All right, there it is. So when we were about a year and a half into making whiskey and had built this huge property and taken this risk, March of 2020, something really weird happened around the world, and we were all kind of sitting there like, oh my God, what are we going to do now? Like everyone else was. And one of the things that came out was, well, we just spent all this money making this whiskey. Hey, Bryan, when is it going to be ready? And I'm like, oh guys, now wait. So what I did was what I always do, which is I have a backup plan for a backup plan for a backup plan. So the initial, those 18 barrels were 18 original barrels, and they went into 16 double oaked barrel or 16 new cooperage barrels. But what I did is I thought to myself, okay, this particular mash bill is getting really close at almost 2 years old. I was shocked. I'm like, oh my God, this whiskey's delicious. Right. The only thing that it's clean, it's rich, it's sweet, it's delicious. The only thing that it's lacking is that extra barrel character that people are used to, right? The umph. So what I called Chad and Andrew, back to your question about cooperage, we work with Independent Stave, and I also work with West Virginia Great Barrel Company.
Love them.
At the time, I was only with Independent Stave, and I called Chad and Andrew there, and I said, hey, look, guys, I want to do a cool combination of 3 different toast char combinations for a double oak project. My goal is to get a real rounded, complex, extra barrel character. I don't know what I'm going to do with the whiskey. I might have to, or I might want to take a few barrels of it and add it into a blend to kind of boost the barrel profile as we look to our first release. So that was the conceit of the idea.
Right.
So the good news is I got to wait to release our first whiskey exactly how I wanted to, which was just straight out of its original cask. And so these 16 barrels got parked in our original rick house. Not forgotten about, but we were making a lot of whiskey, so they just sat there. So after about a year, after about 6 months in those barrels, I thought I better taste it. It's terrible, over tannic, to wet charcoal, not good. So I was like, all right, it's not ready yet. After about a year, I still wasn't happy with it. And I thought, crap. So I thought, all right, I'm going to let these barrels just kind of do their thing, give them some time. So I've got a few little projects like that in the rick house. And I work with Chris Moore, works with me. He's a fantastic partner in the maturation side of things. Right. And so every now and again, I say, hey, Chris, let's have somebody go and take a sample from this project and this project and this project, and let you and I evaluate them and see where they are, just to see, and so February of this year, he pulled some samples of those 16 barrels, and I was like, oh my God, that is really, really good. And special enough to where I'd like to release that just as its own thing. So we did a micro blend of those 3 different special cooper special barrels that we had made. I did a representative micro blend of those 3 together, and me and Chris were just like, hey, here's something that we could release at the end of this year, is something special. And so there it is. So I mean, this isn't a pro. Now I will tell you, I've started to do some other double oak stuff, before we realized how delicious that was. So there is more coming, but this was really one of those things that, again, it was really meant to be something else. Sometimes you just got to let the whiskey do what it's going to do, just not get in its way.
I love that. I love that. So what it was the final age on it?
So it's that whiskey. It spent just over 2 years in its original cask.
Mm-hmm.
Then we put it into these new barrels, and it's set in those for just over 3 years. So that whiskey's about 5.5 years.
About
old.
5. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it is okay. Going back to the other one, which I know it's French oak. It's a little bit different. This one is so dark and dank. I say dank a lot, but like it's very like brown sugar, molasses, all of those very dark, almost Texas whiskey type flavors that you're coming through. But you still get the subtleties of that rye, which is not that normal rye complex that you get. It's very sweet in its profile.
Right, yes.
So it's like a dark chocolate that just happens to have some sweetness to it, like a 90% cacao that's like, wow, that's for some reason that's sweet. To me, and what was the proof on it again?
I think that one's was it 106 maybe?
106.9.
9.9.
Yeah.
So that's basically that's what it came out of the barrel. We didn't do any proof.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about that. What is your barrel entry proof then?
So when we first got started, we were running our column basically like a batch column because we really didn't have the funding to run it, continuously 24/7. Right. So because we were running it as essentially like a batch column where, we would turn it on and run it as it's supposed to be running, but we would turn it off and we'd turn it on, turn it off at an 8-hour shift. Right. So depending on what that fermenter and that fermentation was for that fermenter versus the one that we did the next day versus the one that we did the next day, we knew that we were going to yield, in rye whiskey, we yield about 6 barrels per batch. So I know no matter what, I'm not going to carry any whiskey over. So for the first 2 years of our existence, basically whatever the volume would get to fill 6 barrels is what we put it in the barrel at. Now my target was 110. That was my target. So lower barrel entry proof. Again, that was something that Shane and Pat, brought to me. And I know there are a lot of other distilleries that, will tell you that, the more water that you have in the solution, it brings out some different characteristics of the barrel. And also very like right from the start, I really listened a lot to Andrew Weabrink. He and I spent a lot of time together. He was absolutely he was blown away by these Char 1 complex toast barrels, but he couldn't really get anybody on board because they're making barrels for Wild Turkey and Beam Suntory and
Char 5.
Yeah, that's it. What ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So really, Jason Bronner and at Buzzard's Roost and Hard Truth, as far as I know, are really the first two that really fully adopted this. And it was just because, again, for me, anybody could say whatever they want. The proof's in the pudding, and Andrew had some trials. First of all, he showed me on white papers why he suggested it, but then we got to taste through some whiskeys. And so then he said, look, if you're making a sweet mash distillate, and I brought him some new make, and he said, your distillate is clean, it's bright, it's complex. He said, you don't need subtraction from the barrel. All you need is addition. So a heavy char, it does not add any flavor. The only thing that gives you flavor is the toasted layer that's behind that char. So he said, why would we create this big complex toast and then burn half of it away? Create the complex toast, and then we'll just do a flash char on the inside. And then you're going to benefit from all those complex sugars. So, that was the philosophy behind our barrels. And so almost all of our barrels we basically have 3 custom char toast combinations. At the beginning, we tried some other stuff too. But now we've got 3 custom ones that Independent Stave made for us. And then one that West Virginia Great Barrel Company made for us. They're all char 1 complex toasts. And then through the lens of about 3 or 4 years, I also found this sweet spot with our distillate that's about 113. So starting in 2022 forward, every barrel we filled has been filled at 113. Okay. So moving forward, so what I'm saying is you can find a cask strength from us like that one that's going to be 106.9. You can also find a cask strength from us that's going to be 122. Because some of those first runs went in the barrel at different proofs. Obviously, the maturation also where it is in the rear cask can change that too. But now moving forward, we're entering everything at 113, and that whiskey should start pushing through, in the next 2 years or so.
Right.
Yeah.
So don't look for a hazmat hard truth anytime soon.
You know what? There are a couple out there. We actually just had somebody. So what's the official? What do people? Does it have to be over 130?
140.
Oh no hazmats from us then. No.
140 or 70% alcohol.
I think we had one that was like 129, a single barrel, and man, it was wild because that thing drank like 100 proof all day long, and so delicious. Yeah.
Well, I will tell the listeners at home that this double oaked,
it's good, isn't it? I love it.
It's all of them are so very different from each other.
Thank you.
And so for one company to have a SKU you have other bottlings as well, but to have a SKU like you do and have everything be so different. And I understand the Mellencamp one could be a more limited release or whatever you want to call it, but this double oak to me is so reminiscent of something I've had before, which obviously tasting is just a memory, right? As like you're talking about with your grandma's cooking and stuff like that. You're trying to relate some of the taste in your whiskey to what she was making as well. And I feel that for sure. And that's the whiskey somm in me coming out. But, but at the same time, it's there's a complexity here that I need to sit down with this, not a camera on my face, with this for an hour or so to where I can really break it apart, because there's a lot of nuance in there. Obviously it's oaky, right? That's the whole point. And the color difference is probably, I don't know, 15% different from the other rye.
Right.
But I will tell you, and I love Independent Stave and what was it, West Virginia or Virginia?
Yeah, great West Virginia Great Barrel Company.
Right. They are both doing amazing stuff with barrel, the procurement of the barrels, and I understand right now it's hard to find good seasoned American white oak. I get it. We're all, not me personally, I guess inadvertently we are all struggling to find some good wood. Oh wow.
Right.
Wow. That's going to go all over the internet.
That's the quote of the day. That's it.
Absolutely. But you're right, because I don't know if when you first started, but one of my sponsors is Bad Motivator Barrels, and they take they're mainly from more like the home brewer. So it's like a 2-gallon barrel, but it's like a bain-marie style pot. And then they have the head, and it acts like a 53-gallon barrel. But
that's cool.
He's able to get 4-year-old Missouri oak. So the fact that he's able to do that, and he just picked up some French oak and all kinds of stuff. Guys, go check him out. But
that's cool.
But at the same time, what is, and if you can't disclose this information, I understand. But what is some of the ages that you're getting on your barrel staves right now? Because I remember back in the day, which I wasn't recording back then, but I remember back in the day we were getting 4-year yard aged. It wasn't kiln dried, wood, and now it's had to change because of the demand of whiskey.
Well, and I think that because of the slowdown in the production side of things, it's starting to get back to a little bit of older wood available. But again, that's something that Independent Stave, just put it on my palate and let me taste the difference between, a 2-year-old yard aged stave versus a typical 6-month, or if that 3 to 6 month for a Kentucky bourbon barrel. And it's night and day. So we currently get 18 to 24 month. Basically, they call it Cooper Select at Independent Stave. So that's what we go that route on all of our barrels, because what I've found is, especially for the body of the whiskey, and we get some of those creamy, like creme brulee,
Yes.
kind of custardy notes
Yes,
off of that
I see
older
it.
wood.
Mhm.
It's pretty incredible. So that's our target. I mean, right now that's the oldest wood that we can get for, to get a full truckload of barrels, which is that's what we're getting as far as
Right,
shipments at a time.
right.
So yeah, but it makes a tremendous difference. I mean, the cooperage that's fascinating, and I believe that because of what's happening with some of the slowdown with the big producers, more barrels are becoming available now. Older woods becoming available, so all that stuff's starting to equalize again, which is good. It
Yeah,
was stuff
absolutely.
was getting a little unwieldy there for a second. I
Yeah,
mean,
it really was. And I mean,
wow,
I'm not in the game as much as you are, but like I hear, chitter chatter from
sure,
everybody, and they're like, "Hey, these guys are using 6 month, uh air
yeah,
dried, and that these guys are using kiln dried." And
mm,
like it does make a difference, obviously, but like I feel, and I mean, I would love an air dried 10-year air dried, that
sure,
would be
sure,
amazing, but we're not going to be able to get that for a while unless everybody
right,
stops production right now or
right,
starts recasting stuff.
right,
That would be another option.
right,
The finishing process being a used barrel, which would
hmm,
give you more age, but then you have to sit on the product for longer, so you'd have
right,
like a 10-year-old product in front of me
yeah,
instead of a 5, which again, not bad. I'm just saying
sure,
it just takes you longer to get that out to market, which in turn you have to sit on those barrels for an extra 5 years, which if you're
you do.
not selling whiskey, you're not making money. So
That's right. Yeah, it's
it's
a
kind of hard to keep
balancing
the
act.
lights on,
It is. It is,
So
especially with the crowded shelves, and that's where, that's the other thing that is going to change is I think some of the people that got into this industry during this fat time,
yes,
and but really had no intention of creating a lasting American heritage brand,
right,
are going to start to fall off. I mean,
yes,
it's going to happen. Because again, the retailers are going to say, look, this is good whiskey. But it's the same whiskey that's in that bottle, that bottle, that bottle, and that bottle. And I only need one of those bottles. I don't need
hmm
6 of them, right? So
hmm
I'm starting to hear that now because, like we just opened up Colorado and New Jersey within the last month, and I was out in both markets. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter where you go, hearing the same thing from
yes,
retailers everywhere.
yes,
And so it's not like a reckoning, but it's definitely there are some things changing, and they have to, they're in the business to
yeah,
stay in business,
right,
so
right.
they can't just sit on whiskey that they think is cool that people used to be asking for that aren't anymore. So
Yeah,
it's going to be
no,
interesting to see what happens next couple of years.
it really is. And the cool thing, and I want to talk about your bottle, which I don't know if you had anything
Yeah,
to do with the actual bottle, but
I
like
did.
you have this organic cork, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like the full cork on top, but then like, yeah, I mean that cork to me, it reminds me of an old, like where some pirates or something, and you're pulling the cork off. But then the bottle has like little divots on the side, and then
Mhm.
it's fully embossed on the back, talking about sweet mash pioneers and stuff like that. Like you spent some time on this bottle. This is a custom bottle, which in today's market is difficult because
Yeah.
if your juice doesn't show, if you're just doing bottom shelf stuff, you don't want to spend money on, because I'm sure these bottles aren't cheap.
No.
You can buy a commodity bottle, throw it in there like a wine bottle, throw it in there, slap your label on it, and it'll be fine. But you
Yeah.
guys went the extra mile for the fancy cork, which I love. Like it reminds me of old driftwood or something like
So
that. And then
do you know what that top is? Can you tell what it is? So look at all, you've got 3 corks in front of you. Look at all of them. They're all completely different.
they are.
This is the actual raw bark edge of the cork tree. So
Shut
these are
up.
all natural. This is the natural. This was the outside edge of the cork tree.
Okay.
And so this was an idea that I had during COVID when we were trying to figure out what our bottle was going to, the final product.
Right.
So I'm sitting on my back porch, and I was looking at all my corks for all my bottles at home, and I was staring at a Patron cork, and I
Yeah.
was like, I really like that this is all cork. You know, I
Right.
didn't, you know, the globe part of it, and I was like, but
Eh.
I liked that it was cork and cork. And so then I'm thinking about Brown County, and I'm thinking about our ethos and who we are. You know, if you come to our restaurant, a lot of the furniture is live edge. We live
Mhm.
in deep hardwood forests.
Right.
And so I asked our cork producer, I said, hey, have you ever done a cork where you like burn the top of the cork? And they're like, no, and I'm not sure how we could do that. But let us think about it. So then they came back and they said, have you ever thought about the actual natural bark edge of the cork? And I was like, I didn't even know that was possible.
Is
I
that a
said,
thing?
have you done that before? And they're like, no, but we could, because you know
Oh,
typically when
wow.
they punch out corks, they leave that
Right.
edge and then they grind it up for composite cork. So
Right.
instead of punching the cork this way, they punched it this way. And
Okay.
so one day I got this bag of about 60 of these corks straight from Portugal to my house. And
Oh,
I
wow.
about shit myself. I was like,
Absolutely.
these are cool as hell. So thank you for
Yeah.
noticing that. I worked with a tremendous bottle designer named, well, he's just a great artist named Dave Scott, and he's out of the St. Louis area.
Okay.
And got hooked up with him through another mutual work friend. And I had this vision of this bottle, and I got a couple drawings of it in a notebook. Now, my original vision, this is kind of a flask shape. My
Right.
original vision was for it to be kind of more conical around,
Right.
but I really wanted it to be misshapen. I just had this thing in
Okay.
my mind. I really wanted it misshapen. So then, as Dave and I needled on it, eventually he said, "Hey, you're going to want some nice surface area on the front to be
Flat
able to
edge.
put label or print or whatever you want to do."
Right.
So it eventually kind of flattened out over time. And this little bubble, this is an old nod to some old bottle making way back in the day. That was Dave's
Right.
idea. So I
Yeah.
really had a blast with him coming up this. It took way too long. I mean, way
As it
too
does.
long. But it was awesome. And then the funny thing about, if you believe in what you're doing, you know, you got to really, the investment to make the molds for this a
Yeah.
custom bottle are very expensive. It's very expensive.
Right.
So you have to believe in what you're doing.
Right.
Once you get that sunk cost out of the way, the bottles are, you know, you own
Right.
the mold, so the
I,
bottles are
I,
the
I
same
mean,
cost as other
yeah,
bottles.
I
So
guess you're
pretty
right.
cool.
And it has this fat bottom, you know,
Yeah.
like it probably has a half-inch bottom on it, which
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a bottle whore, but
Mhm.
I love a good fat bottom.
Yeah, that's
saying.
it.
I mean, okay, so I said,
That's
what
number
about the
2.
wood?
That's
Yeah, I said, what about the wood? No, I love a fat
Yeah.
bottom. All right,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
right.
Got it. See
No,
where
but
this is going.
I mean, yeah, exactly. But at the same time, like, people don't look at the bottle, right? Like, they just pick up a bottle off the shelf and they're like, hey, is this good? But like this one gives a little bit of a lure to it, to where like you have the label, but then it also exposes the liquid inside. So you're able to
Right.
see the color of it, which obviously color does not mean it's good. You can
Right.
macerate on oak stick, on little oak chips, and
yeah.
get it to that color. It
Yeah.
won't taste very good, but you
No.
can get it to that color. But that's part of it. Like, then you see other people that totally mask the whiskey, and they have label on all sides. You can barely see what's in there. And then that natural cork on the end, that edge of the cork, that to me, I mean, it looks like wood to me. I mean, obviously cork
Yeah.
is, I guess, a type of wood, but
It is. Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's super interesting, and it's super different from anybody else that I've seen out there.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
And I don't know. I mean, we can geek out about the bottle all day long. So I'm sorry.
Well, you know, and so no, you're good. But what's funny about the evolution of what the final pack. So now Dave and I, we got the glass done, and we got the cork done, right? And then it was, how do you decorate the bottle, right? And so there are 1.5 million things you can do. You can do a leather, leather sleeve on the top. But I really wanted to avoid over decorating this bottle, because to me as a consumer, if I see something that's really over decorated, I feel like they're trying to compensate for something else, right?
Absolutely.
So that's where we, to your point, I wanted to leave the belly of the bottle open so you could see the whiskey coming through. So I wanted people to see the whiskey. I wanted people to feel, to have a great feel of it.
Right.
And then just let the rest, just kind of let it talk on the shelf,
Right.
So thank you for the compliments, though. It was really a project of love, and I give all the credit to Dave and Jimmy Owens at Liquor Bottle Package, who we worked with for the actual getting the molds and supply and the cork and all that. So having great partners, capable partners
Absolutely.
who believe in where you're going and what you're doing is it's everything. And then those relationships were formed again before the distillery was built.
Right.
They're still our same suppliers. I mean, those they're when you really have a meaningful relationship and a business working relationship with someone who really cares about what they're doing, you got to treat each other right in order to keep moving forward, I feel.
Absolutely. And so I am going to close up with this. So I don't know if you guys know this or not, but we've gone through these hard truth, and they are pretty much amazing. Like, I'll just say it right now.
Thanks, buddy.
And as you don't know, because this is your first time on here, but you are now part of the family. So what happens is everything that you guys post on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, I am going to repost it, because that's part of the thing to support you guys. Because here's the deal. We're all trying to compete with the big dogs, you guys, and me included. I am not Bourbon Pursuit, right? I'm never going to be Bourbon Pursuit. I don't have the backing to be Bourbon Pursuit. And you're not trying to compete with all these other people, but you're competing for shelf space with these other people. So at the same time, so what I want to do, and this is for the listeners and the viewers, I want to give a 2-ounce sample to the person who comments on this, and I will do a random draw of all 3 of these whiskeys. I'm going to pour them right after we get off. One of them is a limited edition, so just understand that. I want to do a 2-ounce sample of all of these, give to somebody who just loves a good craft whiskey. And I feel like you guys are trying to be inherent in that, and like your property is amazing, and you're doing cool things with like the whole experience of whiskey and all the things that you guys have going on. And you're not a new brand, but you're a newer brand that people are hearing about for some reason all of a sudden, right? It's funny how like you grind and then all of a sudden one day everybody's talking about you, and it's like, what the hell happened? I've been doing this forever, but you're like, okay, let's roll with it. So I appreciate you so much for coming on here, Bryan.
Thanks,
It's been a blast, and stick on real fast. I want to talk to you, but hard truth. Like, if you're not in on it, get in on it, because they are doing some amazing stuff. And this is just some of their offerings. They have many more, and more to come. It sounds like these guys are going to soon be juggernauts in this game. They're going to release some really cool stuff. So stay tuned, and I will have all of their stuff linked down below. And you guys,
I could shoehorn just one thing in.
Please do.
So for those of you who aren't in the industry, I can't tell you how much of a grind and how much it costs to get placements in liquor stores, bars, and restaurants, especially far away from our home base. So here's what I would ask for your listeners and viewers to do. So yes, we've got the Spirit Finder widget. You can find out where we are, so you can come find us. But if we aren't somewhere where you regularly go and enjoy a drink, please ask them. You going in and asking for hard truth is 1,000 times more effective than our very hardworking and talented salespeople going in and asking for a bottle placement. So if you're interested in learning about hard truth and it's not in your local liquor store, bar, or restaurant, please ask them to bring in a bottle. If they hear it once, sometimes they'll bring it in. But if 2 or 3 people ask, it'll be in there, and usually those kind of placements stick around longer. So that's what I would
absolutely ask. And I will make sure to give this my seal of approval. You guys go out there and support them, and like I said, try their stuff if you can get a hold of it. If you can't get a hold of it, ask for it. And the more you ask for it, the more going to be like, whoa, Okay, so maybe we need to get a case or two of that into the store to see if it sells. And then when all of you buy it, then they'll have more. And then guess what? Maybe you'll get a single barrel. Who knows? You know, like that's the thing. Like the more you ask for these whiskeys, the more we're going to get. And because I will tell you this, and this is 100% transparency. Other than maybe a month and a half ago, I hadn't heard of you guys.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
hard.
like it's been through other YouTubers and whiskey people that I'm like, hey, these guys, I'm hearing about them. And like you said, you guys have been in the game for a minute. So like that's one of the things that I want to promote. I want to promote people that are doing really cool stuff, and you guys are. I can verify that. Really cool stuff, but they're also staying true to their roots, and that's what you guys are doing. And I cannot thank you guys enough. And anything else before we get off?
No, it's an honor. Thank you so much, Randall. And I'm glad to hear that we have a connection through our friend Alan Bishop. I can't wait to maybe we can get the three of us on.
Oh God, you don't want that. I don't think you want that. That turns into something right there. But it's been a blast, Bryan, and I can't thank you enough for coming on here and hanging out with me. I know schedules and all this stuff. We're fighting a battle out here trying to get stuff together, but I appreciate you coming on here. And to all the listeners, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and everything that I'm doing, because we're constantly putting out cool stuff. And if you're not around, you're not going to get into it. So until next time, keep your spirit.